So this is the second part of the video. The first one is my story of birth trauma and what happened to me in detail. And it's a long, this kind of just goes to show how hard it was for me to experience birth trauma. That video is like 45 minutes long of me explaining everything because it's still such a big part of this big life experience that I had to manage through. And I wanted to give more detail than snippets because if you have experienced birth trauma or you know somebody who has, I would have benefited from watching a video long that went through all the little details. Even though I could have gone on and on, I'm sure I could talk about it for like 3 hours, but it just helps. It would have helped me process things or gone, I'm so glad I wasn't alone going through that. I didn't know anybody who had gone through a hard birth, even after speaking to people at the time. I didn't know anyone who went through what I went through. Now, since then, I have met a lot of people who've experienced birth trauma. So in my job, I work with people. So through the years, past kind of 9 years, I've had so many conversations with people. It transpires that there are a lot of people out there who have been through traumatic births, which is so sad. They're all usually quite different and specific, different cases, different things that have happened, but the impact, the lasting impact it can have is, it can be fatal. Honestly, it can be fatal. Like, people have killed themselves because of it. And I can, like postnatal depression and, the PTSD, because of how vulnerable you are at the time and what happens with your brain and your body during that time anyway. When something happens with birth trauma and you're traumatized during that period of time, and then you go home with a baby and you don't sleep and you don't, it's going to break most people. It's hard anyway. Like, blessed and beautiful to have a baby. And after losing Brandon, I look back on my experience and thank God. I was so lucky to have Alicia and her come out and me be able to hold her and her blink and move her eyes and body and breathe. And like, even back then when I went through the birth trauma, I was very aware that how lucky I was. But because of the state of mind that I was in, I beat myself up because I was thinking, why am I feeling like this then? When I've got a baby to bring home. Some babies don't make it. Alicia's made it. We've both made it. We're both alive. But all that did, that feeling just made me feel worse, just made me feel guilty. I felt guilty for feeling the way that I did because I know that it could have been worse. So yeah, I was very, very aware of how lucky I was to have both come out of it and been okay. But my brain was just already broken and I couldn't cope, and there was no help available for me to be able to Kevin did his best with what we had to deal with at the time, and he was going through his own stuff as well. He was going through his own like trauma in one way or another, and work was difficult, and so it's the outside professionals who should have gone, do you know what, that mum, she's not okay, we need to help her. And didn't have any of that. No, like not one midwife, which is shocking. So yeah, that, like, moving on from what happened with me, the reason I wanted to do a video on birth trauma anyway, but what has prompted me to do it now is, these videos and getting messages across and being available for you to, people to be able to relate to, and, to open channels to talk about things and to make people more aware that these things do happen. But the thing that has kind of spiked me to do the video is just recently a good friend of mine someone she knows went through an experience that never should have happened, that could have ended up fatal. And as she was telling me the story and everything, I could just feel myself getting so emotional, because I was thinking what potentially could be happening in her friend's mind at the time of everything that was being said. With her, it was terrible because she had health issues that weren't picked up on. She didn't have her medication hadn't been changed, so the experience for her could have been potentially life-threatening even, and for the baby as well, because the baby's blood sugars dropped too low and had to go to special care, and was only picked up because my friend is a nurse and was at the hospital, and the midwife who was looking after her friend was so horrible that my friends and the midwife ended up in confrontation because of how horrible she was. And it's not my story to tell, so I don't want to go into loads and loads of detail specifically, but my point is of kind of talking about birth trauma is how common these things happen, and the lack of care that's going on in maternal wards now, and maternity wards, sorry. Now, I know I have friends who are midwives, don't live near me. They are gorgeous people, they are lovely. I know for 100% they would be the best midwives. I wish that I was nearer to them so that they could look after me because they were so lovely, and they are out there. My experience of having Alicia, they weren't there in that hospital at all. There was no one there on shift when I was in the hospital that was nice. I think there was like 2 hours where I was in the throes of labour, and there was somebody who could have potentially been quite kind, but I was so out of it, I can't really remember her too much, but I remember there was a spark of kindness in her, but then I didn't see her after that. So everyone else who I come across, just, the point is they didn't pick up how broken and mental I was. Like, I say mental, like I don't know, mentally, broken. They didn't pick up how mentally broken I was. And that's really sad, because it was obvious. Like, it was so obvious. I woke up an entire maternity ward because I ended up having an argument with a midwife because she was so horrible to me. Like, she literally shouted at me. So I'd had no sleep but lost the plot, and we ended up in an argument. So obvious. It was so obvious, but not one person said, Leanna in bed number whatever at the end of the ward, we should probably keep an eye on her because she's lost the plot. Like, no, like, it's very, if you saw anybody like how I was, you would probably go up to them and go, are you all right? Because it was so obvious I wasn't. And I hear these stories of other women going through things, and it's the same thing. They are not asked how they are. They're not asked how they are. And I just think it's astounding that that level of no care is happening. Like I said, I know lovely midwives, so I'm not saying this is everyone across the board, but I'm saying that the people who are horrible midwives should not be allowed to be a midwife. They just shouldn't be allowed to do it. Like, you can't be in care and treat people like that. Like, it doesn't matter how good you are. Like, we talk about nowadays how important mental health is, and how we should all be kind and look after each other, and remember that what's on the outside isn't always what's on the inside. And mental health awareness is a big thing, yet we're still not asking new mums, or even if you've had children before. Like somebody told me that a GP that they know, on her third baby, went through birth trauma and went through really bad treatment in the maternity unit. And she was damaged by that, and it was her third baby. So I say new mums. I think maybe it's particularly bad for new mums because they don't know what to expect at all. But you know, it can happen at any time if you don't have that care from someone. So yeah, like mental health is a big thing now, and it needs to be brought into the care in maternity units. Let's check and see if the mum's okay physically. Let's check that the baby's okay physically. Right now, mum, how are you doing? Are you okay? Let's talk about some stuff. How are you feeling? Check in with me just to make sure you're all right. If you're feeling anything, you're sad, you want to cry, come to me. Like, this is, you know, some of it's normal, but you know, if it gets more than that, like, we'll sit down and talk about it and find a way to help you. We don't have that personability. Like, I don't understand what's happening. Like, we just need to care more. And I also think that, you know, as mums, we need to look out for other mums more. Like, I had some incidents, you know, happened when Alicia was little, where I went to, like, really little, and I was in such a bad place mentally. It was so difficult going through all the traumatic stuff. I didn't leave the house because I was so terrified. And when I did, I was thinking I need to go and meet other mums, because I didn't know anyone who lived close with a baby. And I need to meet other mums because I need to see that maybe what I went through, some of it's happened to other people. We might be able to talk. It might make me feel a bit better. And so left the house after, like, I think it was 3 weeks. That was the first time I went out. And they were so horrible. It's like a baby group, got there, put the baby on the floor, even though I didn't know what I was doing when I went to the baby group, but everyone was in a circles, put the baby on the floor. Had to ask 2 people if they could move up so I could get in the circle. And they just looked at me like as if I'd killed their entire family. And then I put Alicia down, and then they just kind of leant back and just started talking to each other, like as if I was a massive inconvenience. And the whole thing, it was just that whole experience just made me feel even more isolated. Apart from one girl across the circle, I think she could see that I wasn't okay, because I didn't want to leave. I should have left, but I didn't want to draw more attention to myself, so I stayed with Alicia. And like all these people who just was giving me really sad, bad vibes. And she asked me if I wanted to go for a coffee afterwards. And my response was, in my head, God, no, I want to go home. But on the outside, I thought, no, I need to do this. This might be good for me. So I said yes, but Alicia had colic and reflux, and she was like teething from the beginning, like genuinely teething. Her teeth were coming through since the day she was born, poor little thing. And she was absolutely screaming. And it was quite a walk. And because she was screaming so loud, couldn't talk or anything, and I was getting flustered, so I told them all to go, and I'll catch them up. And it took me so long to get there. I was in such a state to get to this cafe that they started walking back, and I still hadn't got to the cafe yet. You know, there's so many moments that were just really sad. And, you know, one of those mums obviously saw that I needed a bit of help, but the other comments that I got, like I was hiding in the corner with her at one point to give her some Calpol because of her teeth, and this girl turned to me on the way back from the cafe and went, "Do you not use a dummy?" And like, can you imagine saying that to someone? Like, you see them and they're in a mess and crying. I was crying with Alicia. Alicia was crying, and I was trying to give her Calpol, and I was like, oh. And saying that, I just think, like, be kind. We need to be kind to each other. Like, we have babies, we just need to be kind to each other. It's hard, you know, it's lovely, you know, but it is hard, especially for new babies. And, you know, there just needs to be a lot more kindness in this world, especially birth trauma, midwives, other mums just need to be kind to each other. So I'm doing this video, I know it's on YouTube, but if you have been through birth trauma and you are struggling, then I am more than happy to message me and get in contact with me, because I have a big space in my heart for anyone who is struggling the way that I did.